Hello, hello. I don't know if I have anybody here yet, but we are just getting started building a SaaS template with Remix and Clerk and Convex and Fly. I'm in the process of double checking to see if I'm actually live and doing the thing because I have not done this in a long time. So bear with me while I give this a try. Extension enabler and disable that so I could see if we are indeed live. Okay, shows that I'm live and shows there's a couple people here watching on Twitter, so thanks for stopping by. Checking a couple more places before I continue to move forward with the actual work. Let's see here. I'm actually checking my YouTube channel right now just to see if I'm live there. Looks like I am, and I got some people here. So, hey, everybody, welcome to the stream. My name is Brian. I am a full stack developer and a developer educator for Clerk, an authentication user management platform. So, today, what I'm going to be doing is building a SaaS starter template with my latest favorite stack, which is Remix, Clerk, Convex, and Fly. And I'm probably going to eventually add some things over time, but today the main job is to get something very basic cranked out. Probably going to go for maybe an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. If we're feeling ambitious, if you're here, feel free to hop in the chat and say hi. Hello, hello, Mark, and hello, Max. Thanks, guys, for stopping by. Some true friends who have stuck with me through the years as I have come in and out of live streaming. It's been a while since I had last done this. I tried briefly when I was in Kentucky, living there for a little bit just to test out my internet, but it didn't work out so well. So yeah, so we're back in a place with some solid internet. So hopefully we can get back into the swing of doing this more often. I'm probably planning on doing this a couple times a week for the next few weeks just to see how it comes off. But I miss live streaming. It used to do it a couple nights a week, so it's been fun. But yeah, this is also, since this is the first time I'm doing it for a while, there might be some debugging and troubleshooting that happens. But like I said, let's kind of get down to what I'm mainly going to be doing today. So this is the document that I kind of started briefly before I turned the stream on. And it's more or less just a way for me to track what I'm doing over time. I'm thinking about publishing this to my website because my website is integrated with Notion, but I'm also in the process of rebuilding it with Remix right now. So I have no idea when that's going to be done. And at the microphone, I have no idea when that's going to be done and how we're going to go about doing this. But today, my main goals are basically to tick these big three things. These top three things are the ones that I want to focus on today, which is getting the basis of the SaaS starter built using Remix. And then we'll get Clerk added for authentication and make sure that all works properly. And then finally, we'll get Convex integrated, and I can walk through a little bit of how the structure for this whole system works. If we get far enough, maybe we'll publish it up to GitHub. I'll drop a link in the chat at some point once we get to that point. But for now, let's go ahead and just start building, I guess. All right. I don't need VS Code actually. I need Warp open. It should be up here. Okay, so I'm in a folder called content. I'm going to npx create remix latest, which is going to basically bootstrap a Remix application. Remix is something. Where should we make a product? Let's do Remix SaaS starter. Remix is a framework that I'm fairly new with, so I definitely don't know the ins and outs of it, but I really enjoyed working with it. It's a full stack framework that lets you write, it's server-side rendered React code. I guess they also offer a SPA mode, which I have not had any opportunities to play with yet. Yes, we'll initialize new repository, and we'll install our dependencies at npm. So if anyone out there has used Remix or is a fan of it and is in my chat right now, that would be fantastic if I run up against some issues because, again, I'm definitely no pro. I've built one application with Remix so far. My website's going to be the second one that I'm working on right now. But yeah, I mean, everyone starts somewhere, and I like learning new things, so I'm really having some fun with this framework lately. So we're going to switch over to the Remix SaaS starter. And I'm just going to open this in VS Code, which is my preferred editor of choice. Let's get this centered on the screen better. Okay, so now that we have this up and running, I'm going to do an npm run dev just to get the thing started, and we can open it inside of our browser. We're running on 5173. I can control click to open this up. There we go. Let's open this in here. Yeah, so this is a basic Remix starter template. There's nothing else going on here. So don't really need to go through here, but we'll kind of step through a few things as we get started. So let's see. First step is done. we have Remix set up. It's taken all of 7 minutes after my starting time to get the first one done. So let's go ahead and move forward with adding Clerk. I suspect if this goes fast enough, we'll probably start building out some components. In fact, I need to plan out some of the components I want to build because I want to do some things like layout, add maybe a mobile nav and a top nav and stuff like that. Mark says, work through the jokes demo for probably 2 years and have a touch since. Jokes demo? I didn't even know they had a jokes demo. Honestly, you know what? The reason I started Remix is because somebody at Clerk recommended that like I should take a look at it, and I had not tried it, so I was like, okay, let's give it a try. And then just after playing with it, I really started enjoying it. So all right, so that's done. Let's head back into VS Code and start customizing this thing a little bit. Actually, you know, I lied. What we need to do first is we're going to go to the Clerk dashboard, and I'm going to start setting up Clerk so we can get authentication set up. So dashboard clerk.com. What's up, Brad? Thanks for hopping by the channel. Proving my Remix starter template to be a better SaaS template. Nice. I know, Brad, you had mentioned recently you're looking to build out some new stuff too, so that's cool. I would love to compare and contrast and just see what we both come up with. Sentry, Playwright, and Auth. Sentry is something. Oh, I'm going to add that to my list. As you could see here, and come on, where's my Notion page? Sentry is the other one I wanted to add. So I've got Fly, which is going to be the hosting provider. We're going to stay. I guess I should go through and walk through what each one of these things do. So Remix is the framework that is basically going to kind of keep the whole thing together, right? Clerk is authentication, auth and user management. Convex is pretty cool. Convex is an entire like API database backend all-in-one platform. Kind of, I guess, like Supabase, although I'm not as familiar with Supabase. I've recently worked with Supabase just to do some things on the Clerk docs, but I haven't done anything like really with it. I really liked Convex because of the real timeness that comes along with Convex. As we'll see in a little bit, we'll get to a point, at least where I can start saving and storing some data, and I'll show you how that whole real-time thing works. It basically wraps the entire application in a React context provider. So this way, when changes happen on the back end, the subscriptions that the framework kind of has natively built in will keep the front end updated, which is pretty cool. Brad says, would love to hear your choice on Fly versus others. My choice for Fly is because it feels like a mix, which Fly also, by the way, is kind of a hosting provider, but they also have some other integrations and services built into that. My choice for Fly is Fly Launch is really easy to get set up, and I really like the workflow that's there. It does create a Docker file, so if I want to run my application locally using Docker, I can do that or deploy it to my home server. I do have a server not currently set up because I just moved into a new house, but I have a server in my basement typically, which will let me run Docker files and just kind of like run my own applications if I want to. But it it's kind of this like it's not quite as automatic as something like Vercel is, where you kind of get the branch deployments and stuff. You have to do, I think, some manual configuration to get that working in Fly. But for the most part, it seems to be a pretty solid hosting provider. And if you can have it run all the time, which I know you can with Vercel with their paid tiers. I haven't done enough with Vercel to really understand the ins and outs how the service works. Which maybe the next project we do should be more of a next in Vercel thing because I haven't spent enough time with it. PostHog is an analytics provider, but there's a bunch of other things they do. But essentially, what we're going to do with PostHog is give the developer the ability to capture events that occur and gather analytical data, which is pretty cool. Stripe payment processing. Most SaaSes want to make money, which I don't blame them. So we want to give them an opportunity to do that. And Sentry is for like tracing and debugging. So it'll capture errors that occur within the application and store it into a single central console. It'll also send notifications to me or whoever's using this thing once we get to that point if errors occur. Brad says, like the Fly doesn't have an official GitHub action. No, they don't have an official GitHub action, but it's a single command inside of a bash script inside of a GitHub action that will let you deploy out to a Fly instance. And you can even have different templates or different TOML files that are set up to link to different environments in Fly. So for instance, I have this application, which we're going to use, honestly, a lot of it whoops, hold on. I'm in the wrong damn thing. So I have this application I built recently, and I haven't done a whole lot with it, admittedly, called Space Charter. And what it is it's a planner for Twitter Spaces, which I also want to get back into doing. But Brad, just to show you real quick, in here, I actually have 2 GitHub workflows, which lets me, the one is deploy, which is relatively straightforward. So deploy to Fly calls this run CTL deploy with a couple of switches, and then I'm passing in this configuration file of fly.prod.toml, which is the configuration for my production environment. And then I also have a separate workflow, which basically runs on my dev branch and then passes in this fly.dev.toml in order to deploy just to the dev environment. So I kind of get some of that preview branch stuff. I'm one developer working on this. I don't need a ton of different branches if I have just a development branch that's being deployed automatically. That's honestly kind of enough for me. So this does exactly what I need it to. But I'm also, admittedly, I like using the non-popular services when it comes to deploying things and building stuff, which is partially why I'm using Remix and Fly. Because the typical thing is to use like Next and Vercel. And I don't know, I like going against the grain. That's why I jumped onto the Vue train before I ever got into React, is just because it wasn't the most popular thing, and I kind of picked it up easier, to be honest, at the time. But that's a whole different subject. One sec. All right, so that's done. Let's see, we got our React. Did my music stop? No, it's still there. It's just very light on my end. Okay, so that's done. We have a Remix application here open, so let's just go ahead and push forward. So I'm in the Clerk dashboard, and we're going to add authentication into my service now. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new application, and we're going to name this Remix SaaS Starter, just to give the application a name. Doesn't really matter as far as sign-in options I use here. Most of it is going to be Google as far as my sign-in goes. Actually, let's go ahead and toggle on GitHub. I'll sign in with GitHub too. And create application. And then once this is created, there's a bunch of different, quick starts that are kind of just shown right here, but we're going to step through this Remix quick start here. I might hop around just a little bit because I'm a little familiar with this process, but I'll step through it as things go. We're definitely going to have to make some changes to this to make it work for Convex at some point. So the first step is to install the SDK that gets put into the application, which is this @clerk/remix. So let's go ahead and do that now. Find VS Code. I'm going to open up this terminal here. Just going to get a second terminal window going here so I don't have to keep restarting my project. And we're going to install that dependency. And then while that is installing, which it's already done, we're going to copy off our environment variable. So these are the things that actually link your application up to Clerk. So this way it knows what application inside of Clerk should be linked to whatever application you're running. So we're going to go ahead and create a new .env file. I'm going to paste it in. I don't typically, you want to keep the secret key secret and not let anybody access it, because then they can do some pretty crazy stuff with your Clerk account you don't want them doing. But since this is a development environment and this is kind of just a public thing, it's no big deal. Hold on one second here. Okay, so that is done. And typically I would block myself on stream for handling these kinds of secrets. But again, this is just for development, so it's not that big of a deal. So the next thing we have to do here is configure this root auth loader. Now there are, let's see, is that one? Yeah, so there's two entries here, and there's something interesting going on. So in order to get this working, the first thing we need to do is import the root auth loader, which you can do two things with it. Either you can, well here, let's get it set up, and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. So the first thing we'll do is we'll paste in, I'm going to go to my root file here, and then we're going to go ahead and import the root auth loader. And then the next step is to add this loader function here, add the loader into the root loader function. And what this essentially is going to do, in a nutshell, as I understand it, is wrap the entire application inside of this Clerk provider. So this way, every single route within the application can be protected by Clerk. So now that that's done, it actually might even just bomb out on me here if I go back here. So it might say that it's not configured. Oh no, I kind of figured it would. Okay. So let's move on to the next step, which is to change the default export to use what's called the Clerk app. And this is what is that bit that wraps everything in, not necessarily the root loader. So we'll paste that in, and then instead of using exporting, this is the default, we're going to export default Clerk app and then pass in our app here. I think that's right, if I remember from memory. Yep. We don't even need to export app, so I can get rid of this export. But essentially, this here is what wraps the entire thing in. And now we should have authentication working. The next thing we have to do, protect pages. I'm going to skip past this a little bit because we're going to create a couple of pages just to check some things to protect them. Because you can do client-side protection, which uses these signed in and signed out blocks here, which I guess we could do this. Let's just go ahead and work with that. So we're going to go into index here. And then I'm going to collapse this header stuff. I guess we can add it right underneath the header. Go ahead and paste that in. Let's import all of our stuff here. So I'll explain what each one of these components do as we step through it. So there is the signed in and signed out components, and these are essentially wrappers around the context of what the person's current authentication state is. So if a user is signed in, they will see a user button, which is almost like a profile button. You click it, drops down, gives you some options to customize your profile. Also gives you the option to sign out. But then there's also the sign out button here, which, as you would imagine, is a sign out. And then finally, if the user is not signed in, we have the signed out wrapper, which will render if the user is signed out. So um, very easy way to render different things within your Remix application. So I'm also going to use my command period to import some of these things. They all should import from Clerk Remix, although I think some of them might import from the server. No, it doesn't look like it. They all import from Clerk Remix. So now with this setup, if I did all that properly, we should have a link here that says you're signed out. I'm going to refresh it just to get the nice styling come back in here. So I can click sign in and sign up if I want to create an account. Fun fact, if you click sign in, you still get the option to sign in with your authentication providers, your SSO provider. So I have GitHub and Google, as you remember, we selected in the beginning of this. And I can click to sign up here. So I'm just going to click sign in with GitHub. Yes, we'll go ahead and authorize. Typically, when you work with OAuth, there's this concept of creating an application in order to scope the authentication bits to something that you own. Clerk actually offers some development keys that are created by default, so you don't have to do that in a development environment, which is pretty cool. And then now you can see I'm signed in. I can click this here, and I get this little user sign in button. So this is typically what you would see put inside of the nav header of a SaaS or any kind of application you have to start in. So you have to any application in which you have to sign in. So we'll eventually move this into the header, but then I can also click sign out. So that's basically it. I mean, we have authentication added into our Remix application. It's admittedly, because this is just a quick start, just to like get you started quickly, not the prettiest thing in the world, but it does work. So with that said, there is another step in here that we can follow, which we're going to. It moved me out of my quick start because it detected that somebody had signed up. So now I could see some information about my, about my environment. So what we're actually going to do is I'm going to open the docs and we're going to go to getting started. We'll select Remix, and then all the way at the bottom. This is essentially the same thing that we saw inside of the dashboard, but I'm going to scroll down all the way to the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and do create custom sign up and sign in pages. So this we're going to do is we're going to create a couple of individual pages that will be shown instead of the account portal, which is kind of the pre-built website that you can go to for that authentication functionality. Instead, when someone clicks sign up, it's going to sign up directly within our application, so we can build a little bit of theming around it. So this is the sign up page here. So we're going to go ahead and copy this code here. I'm going to go back into my project here and create a new file called signup.$, which if anybody knows what the $sign is, I know it has something to do with collecting different things about the page. But again, I'm new to Remix. I don't fully grok what that means. So if anybody is still in the chat who knows Remix, please, by all means, let me know. So that's done. Let's go ahead and click the sign in page now too, or create the sign in page now too. $sign.tsx. Part of me thinks that it has something to do with the parameters that come in, because when you sign in with Clerk, there's some URL parameters that come past, not URL parameters, like search parameters that come in from the URL. And I theorize that these little $signs here somehow gather that information, but I don't know enough about this in order to make an educated decision. And then finally, inside of our environment variables, we're going to add a couple of these ones here. This will actually tell the Clerk SDK where the sign-in URL and sign-up URL is. And then finally, where we can fall back to if something is not working properly, or where to go back to if we don't have, where to redirect the user back to if we do not have a state, which should be passed automatically. So now with that, let's go ahead and open up localhost again. And if I click sign in, you could see now I'm still in my localhost 5173/sign in instead of getting redirected to the Clerk instance, which is what we had seen before. So that is pretty much it. Before we move on, one of the things I do want to do is we're actually going to go into index and we're going to get rid of this stuff. I don't quite need that there because we're going to put some of the information inside of a nav header in a little bit, so that can be cleaned up. And then the next thing I'm going to do is inside of these sign in things, I'm going to get rid of that route. We don't need it. I'm going to get rid of this. We also don't need it. And then what we're instead going to do is we're going to wrap these inside of some Tailwind classes in order to clean them up and make them look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to type in class name, and we're going to make this a flex box. We're going to say item center, which I think centers them horizontally. I always get that mixed up. And then we'll do a margin top of, let's just throw 8 and see what that looks like. So if I come in here and I go to sign in, nope, I think I got that wrong. It's probably justify center. So let's head back into VS Code and let's change this to justify center. All right, there we go. So this looks a little bit nicer. It's all nice and centered inside of it. There's a little bit of breathing room on top of this component. But yeah, this sign up component basically is what renders this form here. Let's go ahead and copy these off to our sign up page. The sign in and sign up components are what render those forms. So now that should work just fine. Now, the other way that we can protect our pages, which is what we want to do, is inside of here. No, not inside of here. Let's go to the index file. And let's get rid of the dependents, these imports that we don't need anymore. Let's see here. Let's go into our quick start. And there is another option here, which is to protect the routes on the server side. So that's client side, here's server side. Inside of the loader, we can actually use this get auth function that's provided by the Clerk SDK, and this will check to see if the user signed in, which is all handled by cookies. And if anybody's curious about that, we could step through that as well. But I'm going to copy all this into my index here, and then we'll paste this in. There's probably going to be some duplicate stuff here. User button. I don't really care about that quite yet. So I have a loader. Oh no, it looks like it just imported it all properly. Okay, so now if a user's not signed in and they try and access this route, they're going to be redirected to the sign in page. So now come back here. You can see if I try and go to localhost and hit enter, I get redirected to sign in. Click on my GitHub to make sure I am signed in my application, and now I can access that main route here. Okay. All right. So for argument's sake, I think we're kind of done right now with Clerk for the time being, at least until we start getting the authentication part set up with Convex. So now let's go ahead, since we're keeping track of things inside of Notion, let's go ahead and tick off our Clerk box because we're done with that for the time being. And let's move on to Convex. So Convex is really cool. Convex.dev, I think is what it is. So we're going to log in here. I should be logged in. I have an account already because I have tons of stuff already set up here. If I go to, let's just say Space Charter, and then we'll go to development environment. Yeah, so it has a bunch of stuff kind of automatically built in because it tries to be this like real-time all-encompassing back into the service. So we have data, which is our databases. These are our database tables, rather. These are all just database tables that are created automatically using the development environment, which we'll see in a little bit, to store data. There's also functions. So functions are kind of linked to the different things that occur within the different functions that we create within our application. So you could see, just scrolling through here, I've got one that says get spaces, get for user. So this gets a list of spaces for this specific user that's logged in. But there's also, I think I have this, you can see there's a post / Clerk users webhook. I can actually create API routes within Convex for external services to come in and access, which is really useful for using something like Clerk, where if you want to synchronize data into your service, it's going to use a webhook kind of callback approach. So when something changes inside of Clerk, such as a user gets created or updated, it'll send a message instead of having to use something like ngrok to start up a local environment and connect it. So this way, if you've ever used ngrok, it's basically a process that runs locally and gives your local computer a public URL that other services can access. So what you can do with that is you can use ngrok to basically proxy requests from that URL to your local dev machine to handle the traffic. Convex kind of solves that because it will run everything out in the cloud, including the development environment, which is pretty cool. Hold on. When I talk a lot, my throat starts really getting scratchy. So there's also file storage. we can upload files directly in here too. So we're going to try and create different components for things like file uploads for creating the API routes eventually down the line. So I have big plans for this template and I expect to iterate over it. It'll probably be a couple weeks before I can actually like launch it officially. There's scheduled stuff. There's some logs in here. It's a really cool service and it's all real time too. So like if I come in here and I change any of the values in here and somebody's accessing that data on the front end, it'll actually update it in real time. And I think that's kind of the thing that really sold me on using Convex for a lot of my projects. Okay, so now that I've gone through my Convex spiel, which by the way, I have no affiliation with them. I'm just a huge fan. Let's go ahead and get things set up for Convex in our application. So I'm going to open here and instead of, well, let's see, I guess npx install Convex is the first step. It's going to install the library. Npm install Convex, not npx. Npx is the next command we're going to run. So this installs the Convex library into our application. And then the next thing we need to do is npx convex dev. Now, what this is going to do is if you are not signed in or don't have an account, it's going to prompt you to create an account and get your computer authenticated with your account. The next thing it's going to do is going to ask you if you want to create a new project. We do. So we'll go ahead and hit enter, create a new project. Remix SaaS starter is fine because for the most part, we're going to use this as like more of a way to demonstrate the functionality of Convex so I could show you in the stream. Eventually, we also want to set up those webhooks automatically. So when updates happen in Clerk, we can get access to that data within our Convex system. Remix SaaS starter is fine for the project name. So what it has done is it's created a project inside of Convex. In fact, if I come in here and I'll go back to convex.dev, I'll click login again to get access to my account. We have this Remix SaaS starter project that was created automatically. Okay. So there's nothing there. It's completely empty, but it takes care of that process for us, which is pretty cool. The other thing it does is inside of the project itself, it creates this folder called Convex, and it adds a couple things in here. Now, inside of Convex, we can create simple files that use the concept of queries and mutations. Query is when you're accessing data, mutations is when you're changing or otherwise manipulating the data. And when those things are created and you try to, when you create the files, it automatically does all the configuration for you in order to connect to the Convex backend service and then do whatever it needs to do in order to make your application function. And we're going to show how this works now. So I'm going to create a new file and we're just going to create the file and name it, I don't know, tasks, right? Go with something simple, tasks.ts. And then I have CVXI, I think is this is a shortcut that I had created, which basically pulls in my imports for me in order to use Convex. So Convex is also strongly typed, so it uses this. I'm not entirely sure what this values library is. I don't think it's an offshoot of Zod, but it works very similar where you can use functions in order to tell Convex what kind of data it should expect. Mutations and queries are functions that let you mutate and query the data, and then ID is a way to basically state that an incoming string value is an ID of a specific record within Convex, which is useful for when you want to update records or delete records or access an individual record directly in any capacity. So that's the process of setting up this file. And then I also have CVQ, which is a shortcut that I have that creates this query file. So we'll say get tasks. We don't need any arguments. And for our task, we're going to return await CTX, which is the context of Convex, which can be changed and manipulated. I've done that in Space Charter, which I've shortcutted the authentication components. And I'm hoping to get an article out about that in sometime in the near future, or we can go through it. .db. Let's see, it's a query. And then let's see if I remember all this stuff off the top of my head. So the first thing we need to do is pass a table name. So we'll pass a table name of tasks. And then we're just going to use collect. So there is a way for you can pass different filters inside here, which we will see, especially as we do things that are specifically related to the user. But this is almost like doing a select star from tasks kind of a thing if you have a regular database. And let's go ahead and create a mutation. So I'll do CVM, which is my mutation shortcut, and we'll say add task. So again, going through it, these setups are almost identical. It's just one's for changing, one's for querying. they both have a handler function, which is like like the operation that needs to occur within context or within Convex. You have your CTX, which contains your database and your auth, among other things. You have arguments, which when we use arguments, you'll see in a moment, will map back to the list of arguments we pass here, which let's go ahead and see that now. So as far as arguments, when you're adding a task, simple to do tracker, right? There's one thing you pretty much need to add, and that's the name of the task, right? And we're going to name that, we're going to set this a type of string. And the reason this is important is because when you use this on the front end, Convex will automatically detect that this should be a string. And if you try and pass in a different value, your application is going to complain about it. It basically it sets up the guardrails for you. So this way you know what kind of data is going to be passed in. And next thing we're going to do is we're going to return await ctx.db.insert. And then we'll also pass in tasks as the name of the table. And then for our values, we'll just pass in name. And this is where the args comes into play. So everything that's inside of this args property here can be accessed in the args parameter that comes into this function. So let's go ahead and say args.name. And that is basically all the code we need in order to save a task into this table. Now, in order to leverage this from the front end, we're actually going to get rid of this. And I'm going to comment out my ID because even though this is going to be useful, I don't like the fact that VS Code is showing me that this file is red. So we're going to come into our index page. And let's go ahead and just add a simple form. I'm going to clear out everything in here, though. So get a completely blank page. Let's get something basic so I have some text on the screen. All right, so with that done, let's go ahead and start by creating a function that will let me add, hold on, let me delete all this stuff. That's gonna let me add a task and leverage the mutation that we just created inside of Convex. So in order to utilize the mutation itself, we have to import it and so it's available within the index React function page component, however you want to call it for Remix. So we'll say const add task mutation. I like a pending mutation at the end of it just because it lets me quickly see that it is indeed a mutation. And it's going to be equal to use mutation, which is the React hook that's available through Convex in order to kind of wire all this stuff up. And we're going to pass an API, which the API is this automatically generated thing that Convex creates for us. So we can, it's what lets us work with just the TS files and not have to get into some of this API code that it creates. So this is actually what gets deployed out into Convex when you go to deploy it, which is actually what the npx convex dev function or program does for us into the terminal. But we have to access it through the API. So api.task, which is the name of our file, .add task. Okay. We're also going to, I'm going to go the old school-ish route. I guess it's not really oldish, newish school route of using state in order to track this. So I'll say const task name, set task name is going to be equal to use state. Just do that. So we got to import use state for React like that. And then let's go ahead and add a field here. So I'll say input. We'll set the values equal to task name. Say on change. It's going to be equal to e set task name e.target.value. And that should be enough to get us set up. Now let's go ahead and also type in a button. And we'll say save task. And let's go ahead and wire that up to a function up here, which we could call our mutation directly, but since this is an async, we're going to create a handler for that. So async on save clicked, async function on save clicked. And then what we're going to do is await add task mutation. We'll pass in task name, which is the name, which is the value for that state. And then we're going to, oh, sorry, hold on. Not like that. We got to open up an object here and then set the name to task name. Okay. And then we will set task name to nothing just to reset it. Okay. So let's wire this up. We'll say on click. It's going to be equal to on save clicked and save that. And this should be enough to at least add tasks into our application. Okay. Let's go ahead back to our browser and open up our application. Cannot find use mutation. Did I not import that? Oh, there is a step I entirely forgot. So if you recall, inside of this root file, we used some Clerk magic things in order to wrap the entire application inside of a Clerk provider, more or less, inside of React. So this way, the different routes and everything has access to Clerk. Now, Convex works in a very similar way, which means a provider needs to wrap the entire application in order to make that happen. So we're going to go to Convex's docs. We'll do a Convex remix quick start, which has enough information for us to work with. This steps through a bunch of stuff that we already looked at, but this right here, this step 7, wire up the Convex provider. This is the thing that we need to work with. I need to chat is really live chat. All messages are visible. Yeah, that's fine. The little chat thing inside of Streamlabs is actually quite small. If you're watching on Twitter, I don't know if comments are actually coming through in Streamlabs. So hop over to YouTube. Link should be on my profile, Brian Dev. Again, if you joined late, this is the first time I've streamed in a while, so I'm not fully set up and optimized for streaming, but we'll get there. It's going to take a little bit. All right, so now that this is done, let's go ahead and copy the import we need here, which is this. We'll actually need to get use state inside of the root file as well. So we're going to import our React client and our Convex provider. Let's go ahead and go back into VS Code and paste those in. And now it's complaining because they're not used, which is fine. So now here's where things get a little interesting. So, and I might leverage, I think I'm going to leverage Space Charter just to copy and paste the code, because you need the loader for Convex as well in order to return the Convex URL into this this new Convex React client, which is done inside of the layout function. So since we've already kind of hijacked the loader for Clerk, Clerk does provide a way in order to extract data from the loader, so you can add more stuff into what's returned into the actual page function, I guess, as well. But there's a trick to do it, and I've already done it inside of Space Charter. So I'm going to go into Space Charter and we're going to look through how that works in here, what we're going to create. So I'll go to app. I'll go to netloaders root. And this right here, you can see I'm also using live blocks here. So what we're going to do here is, instead of just passing in root auth loader and then passing in our args, we're also going to use this kind of callback function in order to inject things into the data that gets returned from the Clerk root auth loader into the page itself. This essentially gives us access to the data lower down the road. And we're actually going to, instead of doing it directly within layout, we're going to do this within the app instead. Because in order to integrate Clerk into it, it needs to be done with inside the app, which we'll touch on that before we're done with the stream today. All right, so let's go ahead and copy this whole chunk here. So I don't have to type all this out. Go back into VS Code, and inside of our root, we're just going to delete the existing loader and replace it with this new one. I don't have live blocks in this one, which live blocks is a really cool service, which might actually make it into here to do some more real-time stuff. I have it used in Space Charter, it's for a real-time text editor, so people can collaborate on notes for Twitter Spaces. I'm also working on an example where you can have like real-time commenting going back and forth on specific tasks in my case. But okay, so now that this is set up here, we should be able to access the Convex URL environment variable. So I'm also going to copy out this here. Actually, you know what? I lied. Let's follow along with the quick start, and then we will touch on the different things we need to do in order to make Clerk and Convex talk together the right way they should inside of a Remix application. So I'm going to copy this off, and inside of layout, we're going to paste that in. So what we're doing here, let's import use loader data. So for those not familiar with Remix, I do know this enough. Before a page is rendered and sent from the server back to the client, a loader function or an actions function will run, depending on the HTTP method that is being used to request the page. You can run any kind of data in here, anything in here you want to. This could access databases, request data, send it back, check for the user thing, check for the user is logged in, which is what we did on the index. But anytime you need to pull data from the server side and send it to the client side, the loaders or actions is what you want to use it with. So in this case, what we're doing is we're using that loader data and pulling out the env, which part of me thinks that this might not be the right thing because we're using Clerk. There might be a slight change we need to do. Loader data, root convex, loader data, innovate convex. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I do have it set up properly. Well, I guess we're going to find out. If it fails on me, we'll find out. But anyway, we can pull out the environment variable here, and then we're creating a convex client and storing it inside of a state object. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to say convex provider. And we're going to pass the client of convex in here, which is that object that's inside a state. And then we're going to wrap that our children inside of that. So this wraps the entire application inside of a convex provider. So this way we can access the mutations and queries and also get that real-time magic working. Okay, now that that's there, let's test that this works. I have a remix start. I have to fix the styling on that. Hold on. Flex, we'll do flex. Call. We don't need the height to be the full screen. That's enough. We'll also do margin MT. I guess this would be the page. So we'll do padding of 8. Right? Yeah. A little breathing room on top. All right. So I've got just the save task. Oh, wow. That's completely invisible. That's crazy. Let's do. I'm going to add a little styling there so I could see some of this stuff. So we'll do, I'm eventually going to get Shad CN added in here, but this works for now. Class name is going to be equal to rounded border slate. I don't know, 800. I like slate. Usually makes things look pretty nice. There we go. And we'll actually give it a padding. P2. It's something. Okay, so now I can come in here and I can say hello world. And click Save Task. Nothing happened. It's because we're not actually accessing the data using the query. But if I come into my Convex here, and I go to Tasks, I have a name here. It's already got an ID. It's got a creation time. So we're indeed saving data. Now, let's go ahead and update this thing so we can see the data actually being rendered. So I'm going to add another div here. And we're going to do class name. We'll just do border top. Border top, border. What do we do? Slate 800. So we should get just a little border there on top here. Maybe not. Maybe I got my classes wrong. Save that. Yep, got a little border. Okay, cool. That's enough. Just enough to like show some visual separation between the two. I guess the HR would have worked just fine. But here we are. So now the way that we can actually import the data, which is pretty cool since we already created the query, is const tasks equals use query, which is going to be imported from convex/react api.tasks.get tasks, and it's safe. And then inside of our body here, we're going to iterate over that. So we'll do tasks.map. Yeah, I guess if it has something, tasks.map. We're going to map that to just a line. So we'll just do, actually, no, let's do unordered list. So we have a list here, and then we'll make this a list item. We'll set the key to task._ID. That is the ID value that we saw inside here. And then let's inside of the actual list item itself do tasks.t.name. Like that. And here's my hello world. So we have that there. Now, here's the cool thing. If I say, how are you? And click save and say another task and click save. What I find magical, if you will, for lack of a better term, about this whole configuration is that I don't have to, inside of my functions here, take the data that was just created. Like, so typically inside of a React application, at least what I've worked with before, I'm not sure other libraries probably handle some of this for you, but it's not been my experience, is when you send data to a database, you might get back an ID value, which you then have to take and add to a list of tasks that you're tracking inside of a state object in order to refresh this here to re-render it. And none of that is required. It's just because we're wrapping everything inside of the Convex provider and using these mutations and queries and has that real timeness set up, none of that's necessary. It's doing it on some level, I imagine, but I'm just glad that I, as a developer, don't have to worry about that, which is really cool. So with all of that said, we more or less have Convex set up inside of our application. Now, while we have Convex, we're going to come back to this page here, and we're going to say integrate Clerk and Convex. Now, while all that is done and is true, the thing is we don't have any kind of security built in here, right? So if I log in with a different account here, anyone is going to pull back this data. It's completely public. It's not checking anything about the user ID. None of it's linked back to the user in any way, shape, or form. So we're going to fix that. And we're going to do that. I guess before I even do that, I should explain kind of how this whole architecture is going to work because it'll make more sense. So typically in an application, you have your front end, and then you have, let's just go ahead and copy paste this. You have your back end. Why not spell these things out? Front end. Zoom in on here a little bit. You have your back end, and then you might have your database, right? And then as things occur, you're accessing data or whatever, you basically have your request comes to the back end. The back end will check, your authentication bits and make sure everything's working the right way. And if it is, it'll send it to the database and request the data. There's probably some database calls and checking the user object, depending on what kind of authentication method you're using. And then provided everything is good, you get the data sent back to the front, to the back end, to the front end in order for it to be rendered. Now, this is the way that traditional apps work if you're kind of building everything yourself. And I'm grossly simplifying this whole process. I understand there's lots of different infrastructure setups and ways that you can do this, but for the sake of argument, this is typically, at least in my mind, the way that I think about the most basic architecture when it comes to building an application. Now, the way that Convex works, if you use Clerk and Convex, we have to think about this a little bit differently. So we have our front end. That's the same, right? And we have instead, Clerk sits kind of off in here by itself. This is what handles the authentication, the user management. Good Lord, I can't spell. So this way, when a user signs in, let's make this red or blue. Why not? The user signs in and sends, it creates a sign-in request with Clerk. Clerk will send back what's called a token. And that token is a representation of the user. Now, if you had your own backend, let's go back to making this black. If you have your own backend, the way that you would validate these things, and this is true even if you're using the Clerk SDKs, it doesn't matter. Let's see here. Let's do backend. Is when you make that request, which we'll send, we'll use blue. Just keep this going. When you send the request off to your backend will request what's called a set of keys from Clerk in order to basically check to make sure that the token that's coming through with the request maps to a user and the session is valid and all that stuff works, right? And then provided that whole thing works, then all of a sudden your data gets sent back. Well, there's a couple things. Now, you do this with Remix, right? This is kind of, in a sense, what we're doing inside of the index file with this, because this runs on the server. So this technically is our backend, and we're checking to make sure that we're authenticated, we have some user information, and everything is working with Clerk using those public keys. The problem is you also have now this whole concept of Convex. And remember when I'm not sure if I had mentioned this actually, but Convex is not technically your backend. It's a backend service, but it's not the backend that is run inside of your Remix application. There's no kind of API that's being like kind of bundled in with your Remix application. It's its own standalone entity. So what we need to do is we need to figure out, which I say figure out, even though I'm going to show you how to do it, so that when a request comes in, let's go get an arrow here again. When a request comes into Convex, that Convex will access Clerk and validate the keys just the same way, and then send the data back to the application. And the one thing to keep in mind is we'll use orange here. Clerk is not anything that you control necessarily. You're not running any of the Clerk infrastructure inside of your application. You're also not running any of the Convex infrastructure inside of your application. Those are all hosted and out somewhere else. Now, luckily, Convex does actually have a way to integrate with Clerk. And if it'll take the authentication info, the session info that is embedded in the cookies that gets sent along to your backend, it'll take that data, instead send it to Convex, and Convex can be configured to check with Clerk to make sure that the request is valid, right? And it maps to a user. So that's the step we're gonna walk through now. So the goal of this, even though this sounds relatively complicated, is in my mind, when someone uses this application and spins up their service in Convex and spins up their service in Clerk, they have everything they need to do to build a full-blown application. I eventually want to get into, and this is a little bit of future thinking when it comes to what my plan is with this, is I want to build a little CLI into this thing. So this way someone can go like, I don't know, npm add colon model and then pass in the name of a model. It creates the necessary like CRUD functions inside of a Convex file. Maybe creates the routes inside of the Remix application. Maybe goes as far as creating like the shells of forms that need to be created. Stuff like that, just to make it as easy as possible for people to create applications like on a basic level. Obviously, most real applications have a little bit of customization that are required to them. But your starting points, I think in my mind, a lot of it's going to be very similar. So this is the function I think we're going to get set up now. And then depending on how long this takes, might call the stream, might keep going for a little bit, maybe polish it up with some shad CN-ness. See how that goes. All right, so there's that. We've gone through the whole infrastructure. We know what we're doing. Let's go to VS Code. And everything that most everything that happens is going to be in the root in this root here. So remember how I had said earlier on that even though we followed the official docs for getting Convex set up, this isn't going to work. And the reason this isn't going to work is because typically, if you're creating a React application, you have your Clerk provider, which wraps the whole thing. And then inside of that, you would have whatever else you need. So in this case, we do Clerk provider, then Convex provider. Technically, there's a separate thing called Convex provider with Clerk, which handles the authentication part. But Clerk sits on the outside, then Convex, then your children. Since the Clerk app function wraps this app function here, this needs to be moved down into the app function. So we're gonna undo all this stuff, right? And we're going to move this into our app function here. So we're, instead of returning that, we're going to return, let's see here. I'm going to actually open parens here because I think it looks a little bit nicer when you have, I mean, if you have like one line of something, sure. But when you have multiple lines that you're returning, I don't really like that. So we're actually going to put children back here. And then in Remix, there's this concept of an outlet, which is basically these like nested areas of an application. So instead of passing children here, we're going to pass outlet in here. So this way, anything that is rendered inside of this, which will essentially be every page of the application, will be wrapped inside of the Convex provider. But now we have another issue, and that issue is we need access to the loader data in order to render this off. So the loader in the root file is called on this layout function, but we can use a special function called use root loader data instead of loader data. I think that's what it's called. Hold on a second. I could have sworn had missing function declaration. Okay, this is why I like reference things, because I might get some things wrong. Use route loader data and you pass in root. Sorry, not use root loader data. Use route loader data, and then we're going to pass in root like that. So now what we're doing is we're getting the loader data from the root of the entire application, which is essentially just this, right? We've moved accessing this data from our layout function into our app function. And now we should still have everything with Convex working the way that it should. So let's go back into Remix, and if I don't have any issues, say no problemo. Hit save. Okay, that's still working. That's good. That's what we wanted. Now, in order to connect the two of them together, we have to say Convex provider with Clerk, which is a special function from Convex that does the integration parts with Clerk. And there is also a use auth, I think. Yeah, use auth. We'll take use auth from @clerk/remix. And this is kind of the dependency that is injected inside of this Convex provider with Clerk component in order to access Clerk. Now, if we do this, yeah, my tasks went away because it's not working the right way that it should. In fact, if I open the tools here, There's a place to see that it's failing, and the reason it's failing is I'm not seeing it. Interesting. The reason it's failing is because we have not actually told Convex what our instance of Clerk is, so it knows how to check the tokens to make sure that the user who's making the request is authenticated, and it ties it back to a user. So the way that we do this, if I remember, is inside of Convex, we have to create this auth.config.ts. We have to export default. It's going to be that. It's going to be an array. We'll say the name of this is Convex. And then the value, I don't think it's value. Hold on, let me double check that too. Inside of Space Charter, let's go to Convex. I haven't done this enough independently to really memorize all this stuff, but I guess it's not even that big of a deal. Oh, here's what it looks like. So export default provider, providers is the array we're exporting. So it exports it inside of an object. Wow, I got that wrong completely. Let's just go ahead and copy this. And then we're going to switch out this domain with a string that we're going to get from the Clerk dashboard. So export providers, we're exporting inside of this array of objects. There's the application ID of Convex, which is going to be the name of the JWT template that we create inside of Clerk dashboard. And then there's also this domain here, which is going to be the name of our specific instance inside of Clerk. It's a URL. You'll see. So we'll go back into the Clerk dashboard. Let's go to configure and let's go to JWT templates. I'm going to click create a new template and we're going to click on Convex. You can see this is already set up with a number of other backend providers that, just make it easier for you to integrate with. So this is already pre-configured with Convex, has all of the necessary claims that we need in order to get that data. And then the actual JWKS endpoint is what we're interested in for that domain. So I'm going to copy this first, and then I'm going to save this, and then head back into my auth.config.ts and paste this value in. I think that's what it's supposed to be. If I remember, it might not be. It might be a different endpoint. We're going to find out. Let's check the Clerk. Let's check these docs because I'm not 100% sure. I forgot now. Oh, let's see. Authentication, Clerk, Clerk. It's the other one. Okay, so it's everything except for the other stuff that comes after here. So we can just get rid of all this. I imagine this well-known JWKS is probably handled internally inside of all this component or whatnot. Okay, so now that that is done, I'm not getting any comments. Hopefully no one's commenting because I'm not seeing any comments. Now that that's done, we should be able to use the authentication part inside of our Convex function. So I'm now going to come in here into my tasks, and we're going to make some changes here. So we can actually get rid of args inside of this get tasks as we're not using it. But what we want to do is we want to get the user ID, and we want to check to see that there is a user ID, or if there is an auth object, because if there's not, we want to bail out. We want to just return an error. So we'll say const auth, I think subject. Let's use IntelliSense to find out. So const auth equals ctx.auth.get user identity. And if I remember, we're still here. Thanks, Max. Appreciate you, man. It is. So we're just going to say auth and say if auth, we're going to throw new error. Not authenticated like that. So if we don't have an auth instance there, it's going to be gone. So now we can actually parse the user ID by const subject. I might be wrong. It goes auth on auth dot. Damn it, I forgot what it is. Silly. This is a function. That's why that's not working. Auth dot. And I have to await it. And here's the part of the demo broke down. I forgot a bunch of stuff. All right, let's check in auth dot. Hey, there we go. I think it's subject if I remember. Subject. So this is the user ID inside of Clerk. So if I go back into Clerk and I go to the dashboard and I go to users and I click on my user account, there is this ID right here. This is what that subject value is going to be inside of here. So we can actually say, let's see, we can use that subject ID to basically filter the tasks to only see what we're allowed to see. So instead of just doing query.collect, we're instead going to add a filter in here. And filter takes this queue object, which is more or less a way to filtering query on it, and it passes it into a function. And EQ is the name of the function, or it's q.eq is the name of the function that will basically check to say, to check to make sure something matches. And we're going to say user underscore ID, and we're going to pass an auth dot subject. So what this more or less does, for those of you following along at home, this is like a select star from tasks where user ID equals, ABCD, whatever the user ID is. This is essentially the equivalent of this query if you're familiar with querying a relational database. So now that we have that query set up, let's go ahead and also modify our add task. So I'm going to copy this auth stuff from up here. We're going to bring that down here. And we're going to then also add user ID is going to be auth.subject. So this way, this is like insert into tasks, name, user ID, values, so on and so forth. So this is basically an insert that's going to also pass in the user ID. So now that I've saved that, let's go back into our client and let's make sure all this works. So whoops, close that. I'm going to refresh this. We don't get any tasks. So I can do that. Save task. Well, something should have shown there. Do some troubleshooting. Did I miss something? Let's see. Let's see. Convex bad request. Okay, that's good. We shouldn't have to pass anything back here. I mean, like I'm missing something. Let's go back into our data and make sure the data is getting added in here. Yep, here's our user ID that's getting added into the table. Another cool thing about Convex is since I don't think it's technically NoSQL, but you don't have to create columns, which I actually really like. As somebody who's a traditional database guy, I do like NoSQL, but NoSQL tends to have its own kind of complications. This seems to be a pretty good combination of both worlds. All right, so why isn't this working? User identity. It's checking, it's inserting properly, but it's not querying. Let's do. Oh, I know why. This is, I'm not sure the reason behind this, but you need to wrap these things in q.value. Q.value? Q.field. I wish I got to ask this question about Convex of why this is necessary. I wonder if it was just checking the user ID equals this. Maybe you can just use like a raw string to check them things. I don't know. Now let's go back in here, refresh. There we go. We got our tasks. Okay, so now if I say new task and hit enter, there we go. It's all working. Good. So let's go ahead and let's add a sign out button here. So I'm going to come into index and underneath here, let's just click add a sign out button. I'm going to click sign out. So we're redirected back to our login. If I click Google, I don't know if it's going to be the same. Hold on a second. I got to bounce back to secrets. My son's school email account is still in this list, and I haven't quite figured out how to remove it from my cached instances of lists that are in here. So I don't want to share anything out about my kids. Okay, so now that we're back, we have no tasks. We have a sign out button. We have our save task not button. We have our sign out not button. I could say another task as another user. Click save task, and we just have the one task here. If I sign out, I sign back in with GitHub. These are the tasks that we created as my Google account or my GitHub account as opposed to my Google account. So there we go. Now we have user authentication and everything built into this thing. Let's see. What else can we tackle today? This kind of sums up where I wanted to get to by this point. Maybe let's go ahead and push it up to GitHub and start the process of creating a template repo. I could go with Fly, but Fly is... yeah, let's do Fly too. Why not? Fly is pretty easy to do. So one of the things I will have to do... Let's see. Let's go ahead and add more tasks here. One of the things we will have to do is we will have to make the Convex Clerk auth endpoint I guess it would be an environment variable. Because here's the thing, if we're using this whole, if we're going to use this as a template, the one thing that is kind of hard coded in right now, well, tasks is going to have to get removed. So we're going to remove the tasks model. Although there might be some things we can save in here, like an admin dashboard or something. I don't know. We'll find out. But we're going to go ahead and create a task to remove the tasks model. And then the other thing we want to do regarding the environment variables is this right here. So this true gobbler 27 maps directly to my specific instance. There may be a way in order for me to dynamically get this from the user's authenticated, I guess, the current Clerk instance based on these environment variables, but I'm not entirely sure offhand how to do that. So I can't really do that. But basically, what we'll need to do is we'll need to do like Clerk. AS or Clerk, I guess what's called FAPI, which are front end API URL is going to be equal to something. We don't know what it's going to be equal to, but it's going to be equal to something. All right, so there's that. So that will have to be made into an environment variable. We're going to have to do these at some point, but for the sake of testing this thing, I think this is all right. This is a decent start because we got some functionality built in. I'll show you how to deploy to fly.io because it's actually pretty cool. So fly.io is, like I had mentioned earlier, kind of this like hybrid run things in containers that are not containers. I don't understand everything about Fly specifically. They say they don't run on Docker, but they still create Docker files to run containers. But the containers scale up and down. They have some pretty cool like what do you call it? Like features built into it. But essentially what I like is that most of the configuration is all done through a single CLI. You do fly launch, it sets up your instance. You do fly deploy, it deploys it. So if I come in here and I go to, let's see here. Let's open up a new thing here because we need another terminal session. And we'll do fly launch, hit enter. It detects it's a Remix app. It pre-configures a bunch of stuff based on my history or whatnot. It's just Kubernetes. Yeah, it might just be Kubernetes. But I don't know if they use something different on the back end. Do I want to tweak these settings? No, they're fine. There are a couple of other features that are offered here. Postgres is one of them, which I won't use. Redis is another, which it could be useful. I'm not going to use. Tigris is pretty cool. I've worked with them before. They're like a globally distributed S3 service. I'm instead going to be using Convex for storing all my files, but I like that it's integrated directly into Convex or into Fly. But we'll just leave all these as it is. So what this is going to do now is this is going to set up the application up inside of Fly. It's going to create the Docker file and start pushing everything out there. So let's just give this a few moments to run. And here, starting to create the Docker. You can see there's a Docker file that has been indeed created. The next thing I want to do is we're actually going to move these env local files. We're going to move these over into here because I want to keep everything inside of a single environment file. I will say we're going to rename this thing while it's building. We'll say Convex. And then these here, we will say Clerk, just to keep our things separated. Just got to keep them separated. Offspring fans, anybody? Let's let this go ahead and finish building. One of the things that's going to be interesting to test, and I don't know if this is true, is if Fly automatically pumps my secrets out to its deployment service when I run fly launch. All right, so now we are pretty much done. See, it says checking configuration for remix SaaS starter.fly.dev. I click on here and open it. This bombs, I suspect, because it probably didn't, because it doesn't know how to get stuff. Let's go ahead and import those secrets. So you can go into their side. Actually, I don't know if you can go through their dashboard and deploy secrets now that I'm thinking about it. Most of their configuration is all done through the CLI. So typically what you could do is you apply secrets list. Yeah, okay, so there's no secrets here, right? So we're going to do fly secrets and then help. I'll show you the different subcommands here. So there's deploy, which will deploy state secrets for application. Import imports you can do key value pairs, and there's a way to escape it in order to commit it, but I don't know how to do that. We're actually going to use fly import, but I'm going to pipe in the values of .env file into that, so it'll make it easier for us. List will show your secrets, environment variables. Set will set it using a single one. It's like you know, it would be passing in basically one of these lines from the .env file. So clerk publishable key equals whatever. And then the last one is unset, which obviously unsets it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to, I don't want to save that, but we can delete it because I don't need the .env.local, is I'm going to run let's see, cat.env, and then we're going to pipe that to fly secrets import. And this is going to read the .env file, set all the secrets inside of fly, and then redeploy my application with the new secrets. See, this is one of the reasons I like fly, is because that process is, I actually like that little command that does that. I mean, and as Mark had mentioned earlier, they don't have an official, I think it was Mark, maybe it was Brad. Yeah, Brad said, doesn't even have an official GitHub action. They don't, but since everything is kind of like CLI driven, part of me feels like it's more comfortable for people who are used to doing things manually. Maybe that's why I like it so much, because I used to be in like servers and systems engineering. So like racking and stacking servers, configuring Cisco network devices, stuff like that. So like working real deep with hardware is really kind of like natural to me. I don't know. Maybe that's why I like fly. But then there's also that element of like, I kind of like going against the grain on some things. So could be a little both. Let's try and open this one more time. Open that. Oh, not that. Okay. Redirected to GitHub. Redirected to Clerk. It's authorized. Get back in here. And we're fully functional on fly using remix SaaS starter.fly.dev. So this is running in the browser. This is running in fly, not running on my machine. But I don't like that this looks as ugly as it does right now. So I think we're gonna just go through and do some development work to fix that. So we've actually gotten far enough to not to get fly done. I'm not going to set up the GitHub template repo today, because realistically, this is not ready for being a template, although eventually we want to get there. But let's start cleaning this stuff up. So I'll do, if I remember this command, npx. Actually, you know what I do? I have a extension here that lets me just install a shadcn CLI. It's a shortcut to run these different commands in here, but makes it easy. So I'm just going to use these defaults. React tip with Brooks. Hey Brooks, how you doing? Thanks for stopping by and joining, hanging out. Yeah. I say I like this extension, but it kind of messed something up for me last time, so I don't know if this is going to work. We're going to find out. Yeah, see, it did this last time. It's like, I'm not sure what. The shadcn CLI seems to work best with Next. But when you start using it with Remix, I'm not sure why all of a sudden it's giving me so much trouble. No problem. Yeah, because I see we cook up. Yeah, cool. Thanks for hanging out. I don't know why this is freaking out here, to be entirely honest. I probably should have gone through the manual setup for this. If I remember how I was able to get around this, I just got rid of everything inside of here. We're going to comment this out for now. Oh, let's refresh this, see what happens. Nope, still didn't like it. What doesn't it like? Oh, it's all this. Hold on, I have an idea. Tailwind TS. I am going to hijack my Tailwind TS from Space Charter because it works. I don't think I ran into quite the same issue with this, but if it works, I'm not going to complain. Let's go ahead and save that. So what we're trying to do is debug why this isn't working. There we go. Yeah, something about I don't know if it's the shadcn, like whatever the default thing is, because my extension, all it does is call, whoops, sorry, hit the mic. It calls npx shadcn latest init. It says it found remix, validating this. I mean, it looks like it would work. Maybe this is the line that it doesn't like. I don't know if the variables for theming is the thing that went wrong, but oh well. We got it working. So let's go ahead and just clean up this UI a little bit just to, I don't know, add some stuff in here. We also want to add, let's see. Oh, the other thing I like about this is this this add multiple components here. So let's see. I want to add, for now, badge is going to be handy. Button, obviously. Card is always good to have around. Checkbox, yeah, checkbox. Dialog I use a lot. Drawer I will probably use for the mobile menu. Drop down menu I'm not sure yet. Forms I don't want yet. Input definitely. Label definitely. There's navigation menu. I'm not familiar with that one. I might have to check that out. Pop over, maybe down the road. Radio group will definitely add. Select, separator, no. Sheets a maybe down the road. Skeleton maybe down the road. Slider, sonner. Switch is always good to keep around. Table's not bad, but I don't have any use for it right now. Text area, toast, toggle group. Okay, so I got 14 components. Let's go ahead and add these in here. Okay, so while that is being added, let's go ahead and add a little bit of a nav bar to this. I probably want to create a different layout to use with the rest of this. So this way inside of my root file, I'm not using that layout in there. Get rid of that, clean that up. I don't know. This is where we're going off the rails a little bit on what I was planning on doing today. I was not planning on getting to ShadCN, but I kind of want to use it. So div, let's wrap this whole thing so we have another another container here, so the main content can stay there. It can have its padding that it wants to. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a nav here. So this will be, let's see, nav. For the sake of styling, let's do class name. Thanks for stopping by, Max. I appreciate you, man. Have a great rest of the day. The class name of BG red for 500. Because I like seeing everything red. Okay, that already goes across. So we don't need to do it. We'll do BG slate 50 just to give it a little bit of difference. We'll do border bottom, border slate 200 just to give it a little bit more separation from the main content. We will do flex, justify between. So we have our elements spaced out evenly on both sides. And then for this here, so that should be, I think, enough. Oh, we're going to give it some padding too. So we'll say padding. We'll give it some 4 padding. So then inside, we're going to have the left side of our nav, which is just going to be remix SaaS starter. And on the right-hand side, we're going to say user button. Well, the accentuation on the T's and button, but basically this will show that user menu. Damn it, there we go. This will show the user menu when the user signed in. So we're going to do that. We're going to get rid of the sign in button and see how this looks. A little too much padding for my liking. Let's go ahead and drop that down to 2. Save that. And we have the basics of a header up here. So we'll get rid of this like that. And now I have my little button here using Clerk that I can drop down. I can manage my account, come and play with my settings and connect different accounts in here. I could sign out through this, so we don't need that sign out button. Now let's go ahead and customize the input and the buttons here. We're going to, let's see, actually, I don't want items to be centered. I don't know. We're going to leave those classes alone for a little while, but we're going to create a separate section here. And this is going to store these 2 things here. So we'll have an input and a button. So this will be class name, flex, gap 2, which gives a little spacing between our elements here. And that should be fine for now. Let's change this to the input from ShadCN, and you'll see what this looks like. If you're not familiar with ShadCN, highly recommend it as like a starter UI library. You can see just doing that added like a really nice looking, input box here. So I can click in here. And then we're also going to import a button from ShadCN as well that was imported, because that'll make that look a little bit nicer. So now, there we go. That looks a little cleaner. Let's get rid of this here. We can also get rid of that there because we're going to replace all these with a separate component just for the sake of styling these things out in order to make this look a little bit nicer. So now if I save that, let's go ahead and say hello world now and click on save task. We have our task added. Let's customize these so this way they look a little bit cleaner too. Oh, I'm also going to add my React icons. I really like the React Icons library because I like some of the things that comes along with it, which we'll use. Now, for each one of these list items, we can probably get rid of the unordered list since we're not using any kind of list styling here. I was expecting to get some bullet points, but that didn't work. So if I save that, oh no, now it shows some styling items. Okay, so we're gonna change this to a div, just to separate it a little bit, or not use the list item. Be entirely honest, I don't know why I use div over list item, but I like the whole div soup, right? I like putting as many divs inside of an application as I can. So there's that. Let's go ahead and say class name. Oh, this is going to be flex one. I want that to expand the whole width, or take up as much space as it can, even though it kind of already is. Class name is going to equal to flex gap 2 again, because we're going to add a checkbox button there. And then let's go ahead and also put in here item center to vertically center the items. Let's put this inside of a span. Hold on, that didn't work. Only a little keyboard shortcut happy. There we go. So that'll be a span there. So now we should have, that does item center. Is it justify between, where we have more item center coming? This I don't want. There we go. Well, spans the whole thing, but that's fine, I guess. That'll be fine for now. We're going to add a padding the entire thing of 8 just to give it some space here. All right, so we have the name of the task here, and we have, that's what's rendering here. So that's a flex. We're going to do, let's see here. Let's add in an icon. So we'll do, FA check icon. I'm not even using my React icons. I'm using something entirely different. I don't like that. Circle. I think this is what I've done before. So I got a circle, and then I could do a circle check. Check circle, just to see what these look like. Okay, so that's pretty close. These are too close to each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn that into a button. Then when you click on it, it's going to set the state of the task item just to make sure it's checked or not, and then it'll change the icon that's rendered from that button. So let's say button. It's going to be a variant of ghost, or let's go link. Let's see what this looks like. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to say on click, toggle task state, and then we're going to pass in, let's see here. We're going to pass in the ID. So t._ID. Like that. And this is complaining because it doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and add that function there. This ID is going to be a string, which we'll use in just a moment. So now we will say t.isCompleted. Question mark. So if it's completed, we want to show a check circle icon. And otherwise, we want to show a circle icon. Like that. So none of these are completed. Therefore, we just show our unchecked item here. So with that, then now we need to create inside of our convex function here. We're going to create a new mutation. So I'm going to use my shortcut of CVM. Actually, you know what? I have another one. Now that we've walked through what the authentication components work and how that, I have CVMA, which adds all the auth stuff in here that I need. And we will say toggle task state. Args is going to be the ID, and that is going to be v.string. Comes in, even though we're going to cast it as an ID object in just a little bit. So what we want to do now is we're going to get the task, set the set is completed to whatever to not task that is completed. So we're basically going to flip that boolean there. So now if I get to get a specific individual task or object, I guess record inside of Convex, say const task equals await ctx.db.get, and then we can pass in args._id as ID. So It's complaining because I commented this out earlier, but we're using the ID type as what we're passing in. So now if there is no task, let's go ahead and throw a new error, task not found. Otherwise, we will, let's see, await ctx.db.patch. So we're going to pass in tasks as the name of our table again. And then the patch function is pretty cool. Actually, no, we don't have pass in that. We pass in the args._id as ID, which is the task. So the patch function does not update the whole record. It only updates the individual fields that you pass in. So you never have to worry about accidentally unsetting specific values inside of a Convex record, which I actually really like. It doesn't make you have to pull everything back and then reset everything, or have to individually customize like if you're doing an update statement as far as a relational database goes, you have to. I guess it's pretty similar now that I'm starting to talk through that. So I'll say is completed is set to not task dot is completed. Actually, hold on. Since that's going to be null, not task is completed might throw an error. Let's get creative with this. Let's say new value. Oh, hold on a second. Task.is completed. So if this is true, we'll set it to false. Otherwise, we'll set it to true. So my JavaScript foo is right. This will basically check to see if the record inside the database is completed. If this is true, which means it does not have, it has a true value. It does not have a null. It does not have false. Then it will toggle it and set it to false. Otherwise, it sets it to true. That should be it, honestly. That should be all the code that we need in order to pull this off. So let's test this out. I'll save it. And we used a different thing here. So we're actually going to come back. I use is_completed instead of is completed. So we're going to change that there. And then we have to wire up our new mutation. So we'll say const toggle task state mutation equals use mutation api.tasks.set or toggle task state, like that. And then inside of toggle task state, we're going to say on check clicked. I like using the on syntax when doing some of these things because it kind of like indicates to me that this would be like an event handler that's wired up to some kind of UI element. We will say await set task state or toggle task state mutation toggle task state mutation, and that's going to take just our ID of ID, just like that. And this is going to be an async function. And we can infer that this is not returning anything. I don't need to set a return type there. So with that set, what are we still? Something's complaining down here. What's complaining? I see red squigglies up here. Let's get rid of some of these imports that we brought in automatically since we don't need them. And then do I see? Maybe that's just the end of the file. Yeah, it's the end of the file. I thought this was a little red down here, like there was an issue. Okay, so now with that done, let's test this. Come in here, check a box. There we go. We're checked. We could check and uncheck our box. So let's check hello world. And then we also have this ASDF, not AS. We have ASDFA instead of ALDFJ. Let's go into Convex and see. You get true here, unset. Now here's the other thing that I was saying was pretty cool. So let's find one of our other things here. So let's see if I go in here. So new task is a task inside here, right? The real timeness of Convex is such that I can come in here and I can say true and hit enter. And now if I come back to my application, it already updated the task inside of my UI, even though I updated the value directly inside of the database, which I think is like super cool. If you followed any of my demos, I just realized like this is the same typical setup that I create in all of my Clerk demos that I've made lately. It's very, very similar theme, but it really gets the job through, or it gets the job done, gets the point through, gets the point across, however you want to say that. But I think with that, this is going to end the stream. Let's go ahead and publish our changes up into GitHub. And then I am going to share this link on Twitter. If you're not following me on Twitter, at BrianMMDev. I'm actually at BrianMMDev like everywhere. If you want to check my website out, brianmorrison.me. Let's go ahead and say first initial changes. I don't know. Sure. Fine. Let's go ahead and publish out our branch to GitHub. This is going to go into a public repository, and we have it on GitHub. And there we go. This is our new remix, the beginnings of our remix SaaS starter. So it is very bare bones right now. We've gotten Clerk, Convex, and Fly all functioning inside of this thing. There is going to be a lot of changes over the coming weeks on me working on this and deploying it. My goal is by the end of the year, I'd like to publish this out to Product Hunt as a free template that anyone can hop in and use. Might be a paid version. Don't know. I'm not thinking that far ahead because honestly, I just like building stuff and sharing it with the world. But, I understand payment for effort's kind of a thing. So with that, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you stopping by today. If you have any questions about anything that I talked about today, leave comments on the YouTube video, leave comments on my Twitter. You can join fullstack.chat, which is my Discord server that it's just a small group of friends that all kind of talk about life and code and stuff, but happy to answer any questions about the things that I'm working on in the Discord.